Hey everyone, it's Melanie Hill, CEO of Melanie Hill Enterprises, founder of Stronger Than My Struggle and STM Cares. Sorry. Um, I'm here today. Our It's actually our fourth installment of the Writing for My Life series that we're doing. But last week when we did our weekly video, we had some real bad technical difficulties. And even though we prepared a new The Write of My Life journal exercise for you today, I didn't feel like it was right to bring you number 4 in the series when we didn't really get through number 3. So, like last week and the other weeks prior, I am cross posting to multiple pages. So, I might not see your comments right away, but if you want to talk directly to me, I'm on the Stronger Than My Struggles fan page and I can see everything there. So, in this last week, we were trying to talk about journaling through anxiety. And so that's what I'm going to go back to this week versus talking about our next topic. So, one of the things that I was suggesting that we do before we get to trying to journal about the things that make us anxious and keep us up at night and give us a little problem in our lives is to do a total brain dump. And the reason why I suggest that is I've found it to be very useful when I'm trying to journal or write about something very specific for me to totally dump my brain. And that means to just sit down and kind of like free write. So, it's just putting your pen to paper and letting whatever come out. And it might not make sense. It may go into a couple different directions. It may seem like it's not even something that was on your mind, but if it came up, it came up. And you don't have to do anything with it. Your free writing isn't something that you have to go back and, go through it like homework and start looking for things to do, unless you want to. But it is a place for you to be able to just dump. And that way, anything that's really blocking you, anything that's on your mind that maybe you're not even aware of, has an opportunity to just get itself out. And that way, you can be free to really focus on what you want to focus on. And I use that every week in my Tuesday therapeutic writing workshop, whether we're doing it in person or whether we're doing it online, as we've been forced to do now, thanks to COVID-19. One of the first things that we do before we get started on any of the writing, before we get started on the first exercises, it's, hey, does anybody have anything they want to dump out? Anybody have anything that's on their mind? Anything they want to talk about? Anything that they just want to, get free of before we start to pour, the good in, before we start to try to layer goodness on top of that. Because if you try to give somebody positivity and peace when they have not dealt with their emotional despair, you're really talking to a brick wall. If they're not ready to deal with their despair, they're definitely not ready to pick up and just move forward into peacefulness. And so it's good for us to be able to just brain dump. And so I suggest that you just dump before you start to try to write about your anxiety. And so then the next thing I would suggest is once you finish your brain dump and you feel like, you've gotten everything out, then to go back and to make a list. Right, April? And I suggest you make a list of all of the things that are making you anxious. And it might be a long list. And that list, you just, as many things as you need. And that list is going to look different for each of us. So don't feel bad if something that's on your list is something you think you don't have a right to be, bothered about or anxious about. I've often talked to the people in my Tuesday writing workshop about being open to saying that they were grieving things that they lost that weren't people. People have a hard time accepting that people are grieving the loss of their trips, the loss of non-refundable money, the loss of their vacations, the loss of their proms. Like there are things that people are just missing out on that aren't normally things that you might hear someone grieve over, but people are grieving. And so it's really important to just take stock in all of the things that you're anxious about, things that are keeping you up at night, things that you can't get off of your mind, and know that they're valid no matter what they are. And if you can't say them to your friends, you can say them to yourself in your journal. And so once you've taken the time to really write all of these things down that make you anxious, keep you up at night, things that you worry about, um it's important to like really go through that list and categorize them, because you might find that you have um, stressors that all fall into a certain category, but because they're immediate problems, you don't see it that way. So like I'll break it down into an example. So you might say, I'm having problems keeping food in the house because I'm not working right now and they plan with unemployment. It's real hard to get on, and I've gotten my card, but I haven't gotten enough money. At the same time, I'm bothered because my medicine shot up, and I don't understand why the medicine went up right now because they know that everybody need it and people not getting paid. And then you might say something like, and I'm tired of uh worrying about if the rent won't get paid and da da da. But at the same time, all of these things fall under financial. So you're really worried about your financial security. And it's okay to say, I'm worried about my financial security. A lot of us are. Also, you could say things like, my kid isn't doing well with this homeschooling. Prom and graduation, they still haven't canceled our school for the year, which they haven't in Maryland. So we don't know what we're going to do. And we have a lot of money tied up in school dues. You might say, these kids are home all day and everything is closed and we don't have anywhere to send them. And the reality is you're having a hard time dealing with the isolation and the quarantine of COVID because your kids are suffering. It's a lot of things that add up, but these are all falling under a category. And so it's a lot simpler to take and kind of look at the category of things that you're really worried about, like finances, like your children, like your relationships. It's really hard. Mother's Day is coming up. I just asked on my personal page the other day, like, Mother's Day is coming up. How are you going to handle this? We have people that are celebrating birthdays in isolations. They're doing drive-by baby showers, and Memorial Day is next month. Mother's Day is next month. This is, something we've never experienced before, to have so many people isolated away from the people they love and care about. And so, it's important to keep track of these things that are really bothering us, because I see a lot of people, especially people who have older parents, really worried about their parents, really worried about their food security, worried about their financial security, worried about their health when they can't get to them, you know. And a lot of these small things may be honest, but it's okay to say, I'm worried about my parents. They're, in the target age range where they're high priority, you know. Um, but when we're focused on fixing one problem at a time, sometimes we don't notice that there's a theme to our problems. And so I just suggest taking the time to look through those problems, those things that are keeping you up, those things that worry you, and find the common theme in them for you. Because once you can find the common theme in them, you can figure out how to address them better. Like, it's a lot easier to address your finances than to worry about every single financial transaction you have to make. Excuse me. So the next thing I would do is to ask yourself, um, out of these categories of things, what can you actually do to mitigate these things? Because you have to know that you're not going to be able to control everything. Some things, even if you want to fix them, you can't. Like, we're looking at people in a housing crisis right now. So there are so many people out of work, and they're worried about how they're going to pay their rent if they haven't gotten their unemployment. Unemployment isn't even the same amount of what they work for, and they're not able to work. So there are a lot of people right now that are literally stressing their rent, and there's nothing they can do but they're stressing day and night, day and night. Sometimes we have to look at a problem and ask ourselves honestly, what can I do about this? And if the answer is nothing, you have to be okay with that. Because the only option for someone who can't pay their rent right now is to go take one of those high risk jobs as an essential person. And if you do that, then you risk losing your unemployment if you have already started to apply. People are caught up in the catch-22 right now. But again, you have to look at how you can mitigate your damages and your anxiety. Like, you might have to decide to pay some other things off because the rent is the highest one, and you'll come back to the rent, but right now you have to understand, if you can't do it, you can't do it. We can't let anxiety kill us, because if it kills you, you still won't pay that rent. That's hard to accept, but that's the reality. So, it's important to stop and just look at how you can. There are a lot of people suffering in isolation right now, especially if, they're already kind of loners and they don't have a lot of friends and family. Okay, we have to look for support groups. And you notice I use we because I'm one of those people. We have to look for support groups. We have to reach out to NAMI because NAMI has them. We have to find a place where we feel comfortable talking to someone, because we cannot allow this isolation to become our prison. It's really hard sometimes to make a new friend, to reach out to somebody. But right now is a great time to do it because we're all in the same predicament. You know, it's really important to look at how we can mitigate what's going on in our lives, because we can't always control it. There's some things we have power over, and some things we only have power over how we react to. This pandemic, none of us have any control over what is happening, and what is happening differently from state to state. So it's not even as if we're all in the same situation, you know. So it's okay. It's okay however you get through it. It's okay. You know. And the next thing you should do, excuse me, is to write down the things that you can do to try to eliminate the problem. So if you're having financial strain, it's important to go back and look through your budget. It's important to go back and look for things that you're paying for and see if you actually need them at this time. Some things you can cut back on. Some things, we might be paying for that we don't realize. Like, I have a couple of things that I realize that I'm paying for and I've never used. And I have to even figure out if I'm going to use it or if I'm going to stop paying for it. But I know that I'm paying for some things that I haven't even used, because now that I'm sitting in the house and I'm seeing those charges come through, because when I was always on the go, I didn't see those charges as easily. But I'm sitting in the house now. When they pull the money, I'm like, what the hell is that? I see it now. So even that, we can save ourselves a lot of trouble just in trying to figure out how we can eliminate one problem, because that money could be going to something you really need it for. Also, I got the driest mouth today. I'm so sorry. After you finish writing all of the things that make you anxious and bother you, and you went through a list of how you can categorize them and then mitigate the damage, and in some cases eliminate the problems, the next thing to do is to really stop and make a list of all the things you're grateful for. Because when we're thinking about our problems, when we're caught up in our stress and anxiety, it's easy to forget. It's so easy to forget how blessed we are, how much that we have going for ourselves, even in the midst of crisis. It's easy to forget where we come from, because we're so busy being caught up in where we are. And this is stronger than my struggle. So I know that if you're watching this, you're a survivor. I am. We've been through some things. A lot of us have been through much worse. And I'm not comparing. I just know that you're a survivor. And I want you to remember where you come from. You come from survivorship. This will not break you. It may knock us around a little bit, And remember, I'm using the word us because it's knocked me around a little bit too. But just because it's knocked us around a little bit doesn't mean we have to let it knock us out. Doesn't mean we have to let it knock us off track. Doesn't mean we have to let it take away our goals and focus. 2020 is not canceled. It's just not going the way we planned. So how are we going to fix it? You know, we just have to pivot. It's not easy to transition to doing things a different way. But right now we must. You know, you can rest all you want. You can take all the time you need. But 2020 isn't canceled. And so I want you to remember the things that you're grateful for. Because just as much as, you know, I want you to know the things that set off your anxieties. I want you to know the things that bring you joy. I want you to know the things that you can do to combat that anxiety. So when you're anxious, what can you do that brings you peace and joy? You know, I I am forever grateful that I started stronger than my struggles because I didn't have anyone to talk to. I didn't have a place to feel like I fit in. When I started stronger than my struggles, I found that there was a community of other people just like me. But if I hadn't, you know, stuck my foot out there and been willing to admit that I was alone and I was a survivor, who knows, you know, where I would be now. It's really important, you know, to remember the things that give us an opportunity to fight the things that give us anxiety. And a really important thing that, you know, we must do is to remember that we have to stay aware but not overwhelmed. And so I suggest that we all take the time to monitor our emotions for the week while we're watching the news and interacting on social media. I think it is very important to see how that makes you feel. You know, to say, hey, I watched the press conference today, and afterwards I felt blah, 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 blah. You know, I spent 3 hours watching the news today, and at the end of the day, I felt, you know, I interacted on social media today for so and so hours, and it made me feel. I just think that it's really important at the end of the day to keep track of, you know, how the media and social media especially is making you feel because we're home more, we're consuming more. And just because you're home more doesn't mean that overconsumption is a good thing. Like, I hadn't watched the news for months before COVID-19 hit because I get my news online. And then once it hit, I found myself watching the news incessantly. And then I had to check myself saying, what are you doing? You're trying to drive yourself crazy. Like, I had to literally catch myself because that's not even me. I don't watch the news ever since the presidential election. I just stopped watching all the news. Um, but the fact that, you know, I got caught up immediately back into that cycle of watching the news 24/7, knowing that hearing all of the drama and the pain and seeing the bodies on TV and all of the things, it's very disturbing to me. But I was overly consuming it. And so I think it's really, really important to take the time to, you know, assess how social media and the news and the press conferences make you feel. Um, we have to remember that we have no control over what's going on, only how we react to it. You know, everybody's going to come through this differently, but I see it as just another situation for us to survive through. And I know we can do it because we're survivors here. We're stronger than our struggles. And this is just another struggle. But again, this is why I keep reminding you that it's so important right now to not only write for yourself for your journal and for healing your anxiety, but to chronicle your experiences right now. This is something that is a once in a lifetime thing. And we'll never see anything like this happen again, prayerfully. And it's so important to keep track of how you're managing through this, how strong you are. You know, even your weak days will later reveal your strength. It's so important to keep track of how you're feeling and to know that, if you feel like you're hitting rock bottom or like you're too alone, that you have to reach out to someone. That journaling may not be enough for each of us. And it's okay if you need more. It's okay if you need human interaction and need to find a in-person support group. It's okay if you need to, get out and go for a longer walk, a longer drive. Like, the world has not shut down, just as we know it for now. And it's going to be a little different for a while, but we have to navigate ourselves through it safely. And journaling makes it a lot easier. It helps us stay in touch with ourselves and our thoughts, especially in the time we're with ourselves more. So I enjoy bringing these tips on journaling to you every week. I'll be back next Thursday at 3 o'clock p.m. Eastern. Every Tuesday, we have a Zoom that we do live for anyone who wants to join us, and it's a therapeutic writing workshop that we do online. The group is Writing for My Sanity and Stronger Than My Struggles, and the link is always inside the group. We don't give it out publicly right now because we're afraid of the Zoom bombing. But if you come into one of the groups, the links are available. Don't forget, we set up a COVID-19 relief fund for those of in our tribe who might need some help, and they can go to MelanieHillCanHelp.com. We also put a companion guide in the description for this week's video. There's a journaling guide. If you want to use the guide, it's really simple. There's a menu bar on the right-hand side for you to click through the pages. It's free. Feel free to download it, to use it, and to print it out. We're going to be using that and giving away more free downloads too. So just stay tuned, and I'll be back next Thursday at 3 o'clock p.m. Eastern with more tips and tricks for journaling through COVID-19. Have a good day.